Aloha and welcome. My guest today is Mr. Pono Shim. He is the CEO of Enterprise Honolulu and also Mark McGuffy, the Managing Director of Enterprise Honolulu and the Oahu Economic Development Board. Welcome, Pono and Mark.
Aloha, Tina.
Aloha, Tina.
Thank you for joining me. I wanted to discuss Hawaii's unique opportunities, and especially concerning the Clean Energy Initiative. So I asked you folks to come down, and I thought, let's get some of your expertise and see what can you reveal to the community.
Well, maybe we'll start off with a question. What do you think our largest export is from Hawaii?
And would this be food or our aloha spirit or, gosh, our kids moving to the mainland, our families? So it's a lot of...
I mean, all of those are all pertinent to the discussion, but really the largest export we have going out of Hawaii every year is cash. Cash to pay for two main commodities. One is importing oil and the other is importing food. So this discussion today about the Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative and the prosperity of Hawaii's future is really centered around how we turn that around to back into our economy. What do you have to say, Pono, about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Because you mentioned the Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative, I think we should give a little bit of history what the Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative is. About a year ago, there was an agreement that was signed, and it is a monumental agreement. When you look at the different entities that came together, the Department of Energy, so the federal government, our state administration, so the governor, and our utility, Hawaiian Electric Company, all came together to sign an agreement to establish a target, a goal, that Hawaii would reduce our fossil fuel consumption by the year 2030 of 70%. Currently, we import about 50 million barrels of oil a year. And so, simple math, and there are actually other matrices that we can use, would reduce that consumption to 15% by the year 2030. So that's 21 years from today. But that was signed a year ago, and that's what the Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative calls for. And so that's what it is. But, in talking about what our greatest resource that we're exporting of cash, and the opportunities, I think there's some actually bigger issues that we can address that can support maybe what this initiative really is all about. Yeah.
Well, can I ask real briefly, so when you say exporting of cash, this is to support the transportation for our fuel to come in, our fossil fuel, and also for the majority of our food commodity, our staples.
Yeah, we have approximately, depending on the cost of oil, and we know what happened last year where it hit $147 a barrel. If you take that as a benchmark, we're exporting upwards of $12 billion of cash every year to pay for that. Now that oil prices have come down for the moment, we're around $8 billion, approximately $4 billion for oil, crude oil to be imported, and $4 billion of food, which is 85% of our food supply. Another question is, how much food do we have on the shelf? How much energy or oil do we have for energy? How long will it last?
Well, it's really not. I think the average person doesn't realize that it's a very limited supply.
It's a very limited
we're
supply.
very dependent on the transportation of large ships and containers and et cetera to bring those things into Hawaii. So
the opportunities that, and what Pono is saying, and I think we will address that now going in this discussion, is the greater opportunities here for Hawaii. We have the natural assets, we have the beauty, we're blessed with the most magnificent place on the planet, and yet we're looked upon as being so dependent on outside sources, as opposed to how do we think to bring that process and technology internally. And I think that maybe we can segue into the larger story here. And,
well, the Hawaiians did that in the olden days, and there was an actual Hawaiian term.
the Ahupua system was probably the finest land resource management system ever developed. And it's not that long ago that it was in full swing, if you will, where it was a prosperity model. And I would like Pono to elaborate on that.
You know, Tina, when I'm talking with people, I don't usually go in this quick. You know, just go in. So I'm going to go in quick. This is very unusual. I'm going to share with you the vision as the CEO, or even not even as the CEO of Enterprise Honolulu. Maybe as just a man who grew up all of his life in Hawaii, deep roots, you know, very strong Hawaiian Chinese family, you know, with Irish entwined over there as well. So I'll share with you my vision, which I normally don't share this quickly. And all my vision is very simple. I would just like my grandchildren to be able to come up to me in maybe 30, 40 years and say, Grandpa, is it true we used to fight wars over oil? Is it true that we used to have people who starved to death every day? Grandpa, is it true that we didn't have the finest education system available in the entire world for every child? Is it true, Grandpa, that we had people who were homeless not by choice? Is it true that at one time we couldn't swim in our oceans? You know, that's all I want. That's my vision. I just want my grandchild someday to come up to me and say, Grandpa, is it true that we used to fight wars over oil? Because what that means is it's done. They don't know life other than that.
Yeah.
So it's really helping the future generation. So what we do now, which now is the time, is what's going to help the future generations.
See, that is the vision. And when you look at what Mark brought up as the Ahupua was designed with those kinds of visions.
It was always 7 generations.
Well, it included 7 generations, but what it spoke to was caring for everyone.
Right.
And so when he mentioned...
So no one was left behind.
Correct.
Right.
But not only no one, but no
Not
thing.
No thing, right.
See, what Mark shared earlier, he shared that the Ahupua was a prosperity model, not a sustainability model. He didn't say sustainability.
And that's now what's unfortunate is most people are only wanting to get to sustainability, not realizing that if we get to prosperity, then not only the land, the people, everyone benefits.
I think that there's a misunderstanding because sustainability or sustainability is such a buzzword because people don't realize or they've realized that we're not sustaining ourselves. So now what people are reaching for is how do we sustain ourselves? How do we experience sustainability? How do we create a sustainability model? And so that is the buzzword. We had a task force that was established to look for sustainability. The unfortunate thing is I think most people don't understand, and this is not to diss anybody who's working in sustainability at all. It's maybe to reframe the conversation
You focus
to what it could be or what it could look like or maybe what it's supposed to look like. See, right now, this table is sustaining this piece of paper. It is not prospering this piece of paper, it is sustaining this piece of paper. So the man who is eating out of a rubbish can is sustaining himself.
Correct.
Yet we're trying to build a sustainability model, and we all have different definitions of what sustainability. So when I talk in front of groups and I talk about the Ahupua'a, the first thing I explain about the Ahupua'a, it was never a sustainability model, and it never will be a sustainability model. Because it wasn't there to just sustain us. It was a prosperity model, but it wasn't a prosperity model based on the Western capitalistic view of prosperity. Highest and best use for return on land investment. That's not what it was based on. It was based on prosperity spiritually, physically, emotionally, and intellectually, where everything within that land management system was to prosper. And because of that, the children were taught a certain way. Everyone ate. The water was managed. We managed our waste. We managed our land. Everyone worked. Everyone participated. The trees had a special role. Even the ocean. And that's how we created fish ponds. So we were the first aquaculturists. Prospering intellectually, emotionally, spiritually, physically. In that, that's why I say we walked on water. Not because we're the only ones who had waves, or we're the only ones who had trees to make boards.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's because everything was so prosperous, even intellectually and recreationally. So, you know what?
So it's really about the quality of life.
An incredible quality of life for everything and every person. So if we really want to build sustainability, what we really must do is build prosperity, because that's why we sustain ourselves. And we're trying to go back to something.
So
But
how
don't
do
go
you
half
folks?
measures.
Yeah.
We have to look at the integration, the inclusion of all systems, and not be in silos of, you know, there are many conferences that occur to deal with an issue. And there's nothing wrong with that. But unfortunately what has happened is that we, over time, have now got so specialized that we're not paying attention to
It's not integrated.
the holistic
Yeah.
system design.
And I talk about that a lot. I say
Which
your
the
wealth is your
Ahupua'a did.
well-being. And your well-being is also your Aina's well-being. So it's very integrated. You know, your Aina reflects your well-being.
They were very simple principles. But the Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative really is an opportunity. When you set a target that large, it is an opportunity for us to bring up these issues, because if we can all get ourselves in alignment with that mindset, then what we can realize is that goal, that attainment of that goal, or the realization of those visions that I have.
So how can we pull in the youth? How can we show them that they're just as empowered as anyone in the state, that their vision and what they want is just as important? How can we start to listen?
Well, one of the first things that we must do, I believe, is first of all, we have to practice ourselves the values that we want them to have. That's the very first thing. And we must and in doing that, we must change our mindsets. See, Mark and I know that, or believe, we've got the greatest, most talented kids anywhere in the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we have so much talent here, it is not funny. And we say we believe in our kids, but do we really? Do we really provide the resources? Do we provide all of the support for them to experience how awesome they are? Personally?
Do we let them unleash their ideas?
Personally, I don't think so.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is why. Because of what we just talked about earlier. We are so successful at exporting money and importing expertise. We sell our money for ideas. And so here's an example, one of the sorriest examples. A few years ago, we exported $80,000 to Michigan, to the state of Michigan, to a specific entity, so that they could suggest to us what needed to be the University of Hawaii's logo. What a wonderful example of how much we believe in our own kids or our own people. But I don't fault anybody for doing that. That's our fault. We have developed these mindsets and these attitudes where it's just been perpetuated. And so when I say, how do we, in response to your question, how do we be able to really reinforce and pull that out of them? Well, we
Especially, science and technology. There's some even young girls that they don't even start to grasp that
Correct.
they could have a potential business or career.
We're in a crisis because we don't have enough
Engineers.
females.
We don't have enough engineers.
And we don't
Yeah.
have enough
Yeah.
female
Yeah.
engineers who are going into the industry.
And yet girls do math every day. We do
Right.
science every day. But last year I did a show talking to some of the lead people in the state, Jan Sullivan, down at Oceanet.
Yes.
And one of the things she loves to do is allow the young people
Correct.
who she brings in
Correct.
to have an entrepreneurship spirit. So how can we spark this more at a time where it seems like we're at a standstill? What's the barriers that we need to knock down so the kids see their potential and unleash, this spirit and
Well, what I believe we need to do is we all need to, first of all, really get ourselves right with what those values and those principles are. That's the first thing. And to live them. So if we want our kids to have integrity, we have to live with integrity. If we expect them to live with compassion, we must live with compassion. It's those values. And even though we're talking about these industries, these are really the foundations. That's the context of what's missing.
you had said earlier, looking at who we are. Why is that an important question?
You know, until we ask ourselves who we are, we have a tendency to think what we do is who we are. So I'm CEO, or I'm managing director, or I'm the producer of this show. That's not who we are. That's what we do. And who I am is not what I do. That's just what I do. But we get so confused in that. Who I think we are, people who really care for everyone. But then what we do is, well, I'll give you an example. I'm going to tell her the crab in the bucket story.
Okay.
I was sitting on the beach.
Is this the abbreviated version? Or
This is it. I was sitting on the beach a few months ago, and my wife walks up to me. And I said, sweetheart, do you know the crabs in the bucket story? Now, are you familiar with the crabs in the bucket?
No.
There's a story that, well, it's proven, that if you catch crabs, if you put one crab in the bucket, it can crawl out of the bucket. But if you put a second crab in the bucket, when the other one's crawling out, the second crab is going to pull it back. And that's, we call it the Alamihi story, but on the mainland they also talk about crabs in the bucket. And they describe that that's the way that many of us today live in society. That somebody's trying to get out of the bucket and we pull them down. And what we do is we use that analogy to actually accuse of people
Blame or
the
point.
way that we live. You know, because we don't want anybody to get out of the bucket, we pull them back down. And we accuse ourselves of doing that. So I was sitting on the beach, and my wife comes up to me, and I said, sweetheart, you know the crabs in the bucket story? And she says, yeah. I said, you know why the crabs act that way? And she said, no. I said, because we put them in a bucket. I said, see, what we've done is we've imposed an artificial community around the crabs, something that is very natural. And look at the crabs. Look at them running around. They're fine. There's a rhythm to their lives. You know, they'll work, symbiotic relationship. But what we do is we impose this bucket around the crabs, and it drives them crazy. And then what we do is we use that analogy and accuse people of acting just like crabs in a bucket, not realizing that what we've done is we've imposed buckets. So we've created healthcare buckets, and labor buckets, and scholastic aptitude testing buckets, and education buckets, and political party buckets. You know, and IRS buckets, and legal buckets, and buckets on buckets, and people are going nuts.
So where can we go from here?
Well, maybe somebody needs to kick the bucket.
I kick it all the time.
Or really what we need to do is really take a look at, you know, what are we creating? Are we creating umbrellas, or are we imposing buckets that allow people that opportunity? So, you know, in really addressing what you were asking, how do we get kids engaged? Well, I think we've got to get everybody engaged. We've got to get our parents engaged.
Everybody.
We have to get our schools engaged. We have to have our legislature engaged. We have to get every industry in Hawaii, the military industry, the visitor industry.
Takes the whole village.
It takes the entire community to accomplish this goal, because this is the way I look at it right now. A tsunami is on its way, and the sirens are going off.
My husband always says
And I don't think anybody really understands the crisis that we are in.
Yeah, yeah.
We experienced last year $147 a barrel. And there is something called peak oil, which is when you've hit your highest capacity to get a return on your investment, which is at its highest point on oil. And once you hit that peak, then it starts going down, and then the market goes crazy.
And the price goes
And
rocketing.
it will rocket.
And I don't think we realize that here we are with all these alternative
Resources.
energies.
Yeah.
And yet we had the Waianae Coast, the wind blew down all the telephone poles. We had the hurricane that hit Kauai. They didn't have any electricity. You know, Laie, all these pockets that, like you said, if that tsunami or major disaster comes, is that what we're going to wait for? I mean,
Well, that's what our
the
opportunity
tsunami
is.
is an analogy in this
Yeah.
case of actually
Economic disaster.
economic disaster.
Yeah.
And
Because I'll ask you a question. And it's going to happen. When oil goes up to $300 a barrel, how much is it going to cost to fly from Honolulu to Kauai for round trip?
yeah,
I will tell you how much it's going to cost. It's going to cost roughly $500 to $600
$600, yeah.
round trip.
yeah.
To fly between Honolulu and San Francisco will cost between $1,500 and $2,000
Yeah.
a round trip. Our visitor industry will get nailed like it's never been nailed. Our children being able to leave their islands and then return are going to be so far infrequent. It will affect everything. This crisis is coming. The great news is that we have the biggest opportunity, because it's not solving our own problem, which is going to be the answer of energy, deprivation. That's not the answer. We have all of the resources we have right now and a short window of time to help solve the problem so that the United States can get out of their problem.
Because we can be the model. We are the model. We are the model.
for here, the U.S., but
And the world.
China,
and the
Hong
rest of the
Kong,
world.
India,
We
Japan. Well, that's
poised
what
to
I
be the
always
model.
say.
Yeah.
That's what I always say. So how, because are we past the research and development? Are we ready to really take the initiatives to
Many
connect the
applications
communities?
are on the ground now on the neighbor islands. There are most of the technologies available on renewable energy are
Because
either
we got hydrogen, we got geothermal,
right.
We have
we got
wind,
wind,
we have
sun,
solar,
we got deep ocean.
We have wave. We have, I believe, 13 or 14 of the known renewable energies that are in one.
We don't have coal.
Place.
We don't have
Right.
fossil fuel.
Correct.
We've even got
We,
algae.
we import it.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
yeah.
But regardless, what we can do, see, if we were just solving our own energy needs, we could take care of ourselves. But that's not the thing that's going to reduce the cost of product, or that's going to reduce the cost to fly here. What we need to do is help the world to save the world's economic strategy.
And they're
And in
already
that we can
watching
export.
us. I mean,
Oh,
if you
they
look
are.
at, who's always coming in. The Chinese come and look. What are we doing? Hong Kong,
We've got-
India, everybody.
We have a great, with back to the beginning of this HCEI, the Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative, when the Memorandum of Understanding was signed last January with the Department of Energy and the state of Hawaii. It was a first. And now there's an official agreement, which is just over a year old, and has a tremendous focus now with Washington looking at Hawaii being over 90% dependent on oil, that if it can work in Hawaii, it can be worked.
Yeah,
it can
if
work
we can
elsewhere.
solve it here, then we're
So-
the model.
Yeah, and the other extension of that is now what we will become is the exporter of expertise.
We'll be the
Yes,
experts.
And the importer of revenues.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what we can do is we can
Start to
turn our ship
turn,
around.
right.
We call
Yeah.
huliao, turn it
Right,
upside down.
Julio, the turning point.
And it's really making use of our resources
Correct.
to create that income.
Correct.
You know,
And it's not just energy, it's also food.
Well, food is directly related to energy. Why food and energy are paired together in this, it's not actually, it's food, energy, waste, transportation, housing. All of these systems need to be looked at
and integrated.
together and integrated because they affect each other. And that's, you know, anyway, but the food issue of 85% imported food, when we have 1.9 million acres of agriculturally zoned land, admittedly much of it is vertical or not on the flat, there is a tremendous amount of opportunity to turn agricultural growth within the state
So that
of Hawaii.
we can prosper
If
here.
we can, and potentially export more, but it's going to take a focus on the energy piece. But back to the biggest story is
And what
getting
we'll do is,
everybody
let's
engaged.
talk about it.
Yeah.
Let's do a second show and continue this conversation because I think this is really an issue that needs to be on the forefront. And we really need the community to realize that they're a part of it. That
It's going to take everybody.
It's everybody. So if someone wanted to get a hold of you folks, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Well, we have a website, which is enterprisehonolulu.com. And in there is a lot of information about
The vision.
what we do, but also there's a contact information in
Okay.
there. And that's probably the best because it allows the individual trying to find out about information to visit our site, and then our telephone number and everything's listed there.
Okay. And any last words before we go, Pono?
To me, it's not that important that people get engaged with us. What I'd like them to do is start getting engaged within their own communities, in their schools. Start really, somebody go plant a tree.
Yeah.
You think different when you start doing something to take care of the land
It
around
is
you.
hands-on now.
Yeah.
Enough talk.
Okay. Well, thank you, and look forward to having you back again. And let's continue this conversation.
Thanks.